Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at Donald Trump, 2024, and, well, not just he'll run, but how his influence is really changing the Republican Party's identity.
It really is.
Our job today is to unpack what our sources are saying, cut through some of that noise, and get a clearer picture of the challenges, the potential paths forward. We're going to try and trace these threads.
And it's such a dynamic situation. What's really compelling in the material we looked at is just how much this conversation around Trump and the GOP keeps shifting.
Yeah.
So we're not just looking at the what his potential run, but digging into the why it matters for politics generally and, for you, trying to make sense of it all.
Okay, let's start with that big question that everyone seems to be asking.
Yeah.
Is Donald Trump actually going to make a comeback bid for 2024? Our sources definitely confirm this is a very live possibility. Strategists are really thinking about it. So, given the climate, his continued influence, what do the reports say about his chances? And what are the immediate roadblocks?
Well, what really jumps out from the analysis is just how strong Trump's presence still is. I mean, undeniably potent.
Right.
One report we saw, for example, talks about his Save America rallies, even now, post-presidency.
Still drawing crowds.
Huge crowds. And it points out these aren't just speeches. They're often like strategic networking events for local grassroots folks. It keeps this political machine alive, kind of outside the usual party structures.
Interesting.
His skill in grabbing media attention, energizing his base, several articles call it a unique asset. Almost like a political superpower,
Yeah, hard to replicate.
Very. But for 2024, things are different. The landscape has shifted. His core supporters still seem incredibly loyal. But the material also flags new challenges.
Like what specifically?
Well, there are the growing legal issues. One analysis calls them a constant drain on resources and public attention. And then there's this subtle but significant shift in how some key voter groups feel, something that maybe wasn't quite there during his first run.
That's a really important distinction. You've got the rally power, the media dominance, but then these new, maybe accumulating challenges.
That's exactly.
So looking at those challenges, do the sources suggest which ones are maybe the biggest deal, the most strategically tricky for a potential run? Is it more the legal stuff, or is it about those voters changing their minds?
The sources seem to suggest it's a combination, really, but the legal challenges definitely pop up as a major new factor.
Right.
It's not just the money or the bad headlines. One legal analysis we read raised the question of how these constant battles might affect his ability to actually campaign effectively, or even just be seen as a viable leader without all the distractions.
That makes sense.
But at the same time, the data does point towards some voter fatigue. There was a poll mentioned in one article suggesting that, yeah, his base is solid, but a chunk of the wider electorate, including some moderate Republicans, independents, they're actively looking for a new direction for the party. They want more focus on policy, maybe less on personality. So that sets up this really interesting tension for any campaign he might run.
It's definitely safe to say, and our materials really hammer this home, that Trump has fundamentally shaped the modern Republican Party. His influence is still incredibly strong.
Undeniable.
But here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. Do the sources suggest that GOP is just going to keep following Trump's lead? Or is there a real possibility, a genuine potential, for new leadership to step up and actually change the party's direction in a big way?
Yeah, connecting this to the bigger picture, the GOP is, well, it's still very much operating in the landscape shaped by what the sources call Trump's populist politics.
And what did that mean in practice?
Well, it's typically described as this mix of nationalistic ideas, the America First stuff, focusing on domestic industry or more isolationist foreign policy.
Right.
And that's combined with a really strong anti-establishment feeling, targeting the quote-unquote swamp in D.C., the mainstream media. That story still connects powerfully with a big part of the base.
Okay.
But the party is also clearly evolving. The material shows traditional Republicans think fiscal conservatives, maybe those favoring a stronger international role. They're starting to ask some tough questions about where the party goes next.
You mean strategically?
Strategically, yes, but also ideologically. Several analyses highlight how places like suburban districts, which used to be reliably Republican, they've become real battlegrounds now.
Why is that?
Shifting voter demographics, partly, but also changing perceptions of what the party stands for. So these strategists, they're weighing the options, thinking about different paths that might win back some of those voters, appeal more broadly.
So it's not just one solid block anymore. You're saying There are definite factions emerging, doing their own math.
Absolutely.
Does that mean we're seeing, like, the start of a real ideological fight?
Yeah.
Or is it more just practical politics who can win?
That's a great question. And the sources suggest it's a bit of both, but maybe with a strong emphasis on the practical side right now. Sure, there are ideological debates bubbling up, like what is conservative foreign policy after Trump? But a lot of the talk revolves around winning elections.
Bottom line.
Exactly. One political scientist quoted in the material said the Never Trump group is mostly sidelined, but there's this new, maybe post-Trump or Trump skeptic group emerging, and they're focused squarely on electability. Can the party win backswing voters?
How are they figuring that out?
They're looking closely at the electoral calculuses, how different potential candidates poll against Democrats, especially in those key swing states, those purple states.
Right.
So that creates this direct tension. How do you keep the base fired up, but also broaden the appeal to the middle? It's not just about Trump's personal pull anymore. It's really about the party's future identity. What does it stand for going forward?
Our sources definitely point to real splits, actual rifts within the GOP. That seems key to this whole dynamic. You see this clear divide. Trump's most loyal supporters are pushing hard. They see him as the leader, the best shot at winning.
Right, the indispensable figure.
Exactly. But then on the other side, you have a growing number of people actively looking for someone new, maybe thinking a different approach would work better or just be healthier for the party long term. Do these internal splits pose a real threat to his potential 2024 campaign?
The divide is definitely real, and multiple reports say it's getting wider, more pronounced.
Okay.
On one side, as you said, Trump's base is described as fiercely loyal, still energized by everything he does, sharing that sense of grievance. These are the voters who show up, who donate, who see him as the only one who can really take on the establishment. That's a huge asset in a primary.
For sure.
But the other side of the GOP, and this includes some established figures, traditional conservative organizations, even some big money donors, they're starting to seriously question if another Trump nomination is the right move.
Why? What's their main concern?
One analysis talked about the suburban flight, how moderate voters, particularly women in the suburbs, have moved away from the party in recent elections. And they often directly connect that shift to Trump's style and rhetoric.
So electability again.
Electability from a broader view, yes. They worry that while Trump might dominate a primary, his appeal in a general election is limited. So the sources suggest this upcoming 2024 race will be a real test. Can Trump unite the party again, or will these divisions open the door for someone else to challenge him? It's going to be this delicate balancing act. It'll really define the internal party struggle.
That raises a fascinating point. If some are looking for a new leader, do the sources give any clues about who that might be? Or even just what kind of leader they're looking for? Is it another populist or someone more traditional?
The million-dollar question for a lot of Republicans, right? And the material offers a few different possibilities.
Yeah.
Some analyses suggest the party wants someone who can capture that populist energy Trump unlocked.
Okay.
But maybe do it with a more, I don't know, disciplined message, a less polarizing style, kind of a Trumpism without Trump idea.
Interesting concept.
Then you have other parts of the party, especially the more establishment types, the fiscal conservatives. They're hoping for a return to what they see as core Republican ideas. Limited government, strong defense, maybe a more traditional social conservatism. They want a leader who can talk about those things without the constant drama.
So two quite different paths.
Exactly. And the sources mention several potential candidates who are already kind of positioning themselves, trying to navigate between these different factions, trying to appeal across this divided party. It's a really complex search for whoever comes next.
Okay, so let's synthesize this a bit. What does all this mean for Trump himself if he does decide to run? Looking towards 2024, what do the sources really pinpoint as his core strengths, the things he'd rely on, and what are the clear weaknesses his opponents would likely focus on in what sounds like a really tough race?
Well, talking strengths, what comes up again and again in the material is just his unique ability to rally his base.
Unmatched, really.
Truly. He has this almost tribal connection with his core supporters. He knows exactly how to get them motivated, how to get them to the polls in huge numbers. There was a financial report we looked at, for instance, highlighting how well he still does with small dollar fundraising. That grassroots energy turns into serious campaign money.
Right, that's tangible power.
Absolutely. And beyond that, he just has this incredible knack for dominating the news cycle. He can grab the media spotlight like almost no one else,
Yeah.
making sure his message, whatever it is that day, gets out to a massive audience. It keeps his supporters engaged. That kind of visibility, often bypassing the usual media gatekeepers, it's a massive advantage. Most politicians can only dream of that.
So a fiercely loyal base, huge fundraising potential from them, and an unparalleled ability to control a conversation. Those sound like pretty powerful assets.
They are formidable.
But what about the flip side? Where do the sources say he's most vulnerable? What are the weaknesses?
They're just as clear, and they're consistently mentioned across the analyses. The biggest one is probably the polarizing effect of his presidency. That still hangs over everything.
Oh, so?
Many voters, even some Republicans, just have incredibly strong feelings, good and bad, about his time in office. A detailed demographic study we saw points out how this polarization makes it really hard for him to win back those crucial swing voters, those suburban independents. They often decide general elections.
Okay, so polarization is number one. What else?
Then definitely the numerous legal challenges he's facing.
Right, we touched on those.
Yeah, and one legal expert's commentary suggested these aren't just minor annoyances. They could be major roadblocks, potentially hitting his finances, eating up campaign time, and just constantly generating negative news that can drown out whatever message he's trying to send.
A constant background noise, or maybe foreground noise.
Exactly. And lastly, the sources often mention this idea of voter fatigue. Just years of Trump being front and center. Some voters, maybe even some who supported him before, might just be ready for a fresh face, a new voice for the party.
So the implication is?
The implication seems to be he'd really need to tackle these weaknesses directly if he's going to run again and actually win. He needs to build a coalition that goes beyond that incredibly loyal but maybe not quite large enough base.
It's almost like the very thing that made him so disruptive and successful initially, that forcefulness, that breaking of norms, might now be his biggest challenge. The landscape he changed is now the landscape he has to navigate differently.
That's a really insightful way to put it, yeah.
Do any of the sources offer, like, specific strategies for how he might try to counter these weaknesses? Or do they mostly paint them as things he just has to live with?
That's a great question. The material doesn't lay out a definitive playbook exactly, but some political strategists quoted in the sources do talk about potential approaches.
Such as?
Well, to deal with the polarization, some suggest he might try to pivot, focus more on policy, maybe talk less about past grievances, emphasize future plans for the economy or society.
Could that work?
Maybe. But other analyses warn that kind of pivot could risk alienating his core base. They're drawn to his combative style. That's part of the appeal for them.
Right, a tricky balance. What about the legal issues?
The strategy often discussed there is to frame them all as politically motivated attacks, witch hunts. That plays very well with his existing supporters.
Sure.
But the challenge, as one journalist points out, is convincing the broader electorate that these are purely partisan attacks, not legitimate legal matters. So yeah, strategies exist, but they all come with their own set of risks and potential downsides. It makes his path forward really, really complex.
Thinking beyond just the 2024 election cycle, there's this huge question hanging over everything: Trump's legacy. How do our sources suggest history might ultimately view his presidency and the impact he's had on American politics? It feels central to any discussion about his future.
It really does raise that important question about how history gets written, doesn't it? And it's clear from our sources his legacy is going to be debated for a long, long time. For generations, probably.
In what ways?
Well, he's definitely seen as a disruptor, in the truest sense, breaking norms, challenging political traditions like few others ever have.
Like his use of social media.
Exactly. That comes up frequently in the material. His use of Twitter, especially, to just bypass traditional media, speak directly to his base. That fundamentally changed the news cycle, challenged the power of established media. It wasn't just how he talked, it disrupted the whole political information system.
And the movement he started.
Yes, he absolutely sparked a powerful political movement. He tapped into these grievances, these hopes that maybe the establishment hadn't fully recognized. This movement, often described as anti-globalist, focused on cultural fights, skeptical of institutions, it has undeniably reshaped the Republican Party's platform and priorities.
So on one hand, you have this profound disruption, the creation of a new political force. But the sources also talk a lot about the division during his time in office.
They do.
How do those two things get weighed against each other in the historical view presented?
That's precisely the tension historians will have to wrestle with. One perspective, which you see in several analyses, will focus on his policy wins.
Logic.
Things like appointing conservative judges, the tax cuts, deregulation, those are framed as him delivering for his base, shaping the country in a positive way.
Okay.
But conversely, many sources emphasize the deep societal polarization during his presidency, the challenges to democratic norms and institutions, the impact on America's relationships with allies.
So two very different narratives.
Very different. Whether people look back and see him mainly as a transformative leader who correctly identified and addressed problems, or primarily as a divisive figure who strained the fabric of American society, the sources suggest that'll depend a lot on the long-term consequences of his actions, and frankly on the perspective of whoever is doing the looking. But one thing seems certain, according to the material. Regardless of how he's ultimately judged, he has absolutely changed the political landscape forever. That impact will be felt for decades. No doubt about it.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive. We've tried to unpack the nuances of Trump's possible 2024 run, the currents running through the Republican Party, and this complex, enduring legacy he's building.
Yeah, and my final thought really is that his influence isn't going away anytime soon. Whether he actually runs again or not, his presence is just baked into American politics now.
Yeah.
Deeply ingrained in the GOP's identity, its base, its priorities.
Right.
And for all those reasons, the internal dynamics we talked about, 2024 is shaping up to be, well, definitely one for the history books, a really critical moment for the Republican Party.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you think about everything we've discussed today, here's maybe a final thought to chew on. In a political world so heavily influenced by personality, by perceived loyalty, what does it actually take for a new leader to emerge and unite a party this divided? How much do they have to embrace the legacy of someone like Donald Trump, and how much do they need to subtly, or maybe not so subtly, reject it to succeed? What stands out to you from what we've unpacked today? We hope you'll keep exploring these really complex dynamics. Until next time.